Going live. Go. All right, let's see how we're going to do this tonight here. So I did manage to track down some of the Atkins stuff, and I did a little looking at the back. This is the thing that's interesting, is I looked at the back of some of this information, and it says, well, it says on the front it has 2 net carbs per bar on this. 1 gram of sugar, 9 grams of fiber. Now, from what I was able to look into when I made my plans to do keto, the discussion of what makes a food keto isn't about an individual food. In a lot of cases, a keto diet is simply one that keeps your carbohydrate intake, your grams of carbs, under a certain number. And for me, that number, I think, was, let me see if I can pull up my notebook here. I'm trying to think here. I think, yeah, my daily recommended intake based off what I'm doing should be 5% carbohydrate, or in this case, in grams, 30 or under to be keto. Now, that's one definition of what I need to do to be keto. The issue I have with that information, potentially, is if I eat a tablespoon of sugar, that might have more of those calories. But if I eat a teaspoon of sugar, that might just be my carbohydrate intake for the day. And if I had nothing but pure unflavored gelatin for the rest of the day, do I remain in keto? Or does consumption of large quantities of carbohydrate at one time kick body out of keto phase? And nobody gave an answer to that. There are too many people who are using some slipshod, mystical thinking about what keto is. And so I did a little looking around on this. And one of the other things that's interesting is you get such unusual results and undependable results. So what we have here is it says that the net carbs is 2 per bar in this. But it states that the total carbohydrates for the bar are 23 grams, which would put that very close to my total maximum daily intake if I'm trying to be keto. But 9 of those grams are fiber. So 23 minus 9 still seems a kind of high for a carbohydrate intake at one go. Only 1 gram is sugar. The 12 grams of it are sugar alcohols. And includes 1 gram of glycerin is marked with a star on this. So it's entirely possible that sugar alcohols are what make up part of make up almost half of the 23 grams, and fiber makes up 9 grams on top of that. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Look over at the ingredients. Don't just stop at the nutritional information on the back. Look over at the ingredients, and what it says here is chocolate flavored coating, which includes maltitol, polydextrose, cocoa powder, and sucralose. And then the rest of it includes a polydextrose, maltitol syrup, maltitol, and sucralose involved in here. And so we've got essentially Splenda and a couple other artificial sweeteners, the polydextrose and the maltitol. So then you do the research on those. And polydextrose, from what I can see, suggests it's a fiber. And it says here 1 gram of glycerin is in here as well per bar. And glycerin is a fat base, but it's counted as a carbohydrate. But it's an artificial carbohydrate. It's not really an artificial carbohydrate. It's a non-caloric. Well, it's not non-caloric either. It has calories. It's a non-insulin spiking carbohydrate is where I'm going with that. Or it functions as one. So like that 1 gram of glycerin doesn't need to be counted. You do have to take into account that it says 1 gram of sugar. Dietary fiber, 9 grams. You don't really have to count that. But the question of whether or not to take those sugar alcohols, which include the maltitol and the polydextrose. I looked up polydextrose, and most sources refer to that as it's not really it's not the ideal artificial sweetener. And honestly, when I look at these things, the artificial sweeteners are the first thing I worry about. They're not healthy for you. They're not good. You shouldn't be eating things that give you an artificial sweetener. You should be aiming to curb your need for sweets in the first place. But that's aside. This week, we're doing some experimentation of checking these things out. The other thing I saw were things saying that polydextrose and maltitol are diarrhea-inducing for a lot of people. I went, I've had some experience with a lot of artificial chocolates or artificial candies, artificially sweetened candies at different points in the past. So I'm not super worried about it. Like, it'll probably give me some digestive upset, especially if I eat more than one in a day. But that's one of the things that I'm very, very curious about. Like, you get a lot of people saying, like, oh, no, you should avoid maltitol at all costs. Some of them are saying it because it has a very laxative effect for a lot of people. But some of them are also saying it because it can cause blood sugar spikes. It has a high glycemic index. But I don't see any data on whether or not it affects insulin response in the body. So maltitol is an ingredient in the Atkins stuff. And if you subscribe to the school that any maltitol at all and anything you ever eat is anti-keto, then don't eat them. But looking at the data for something like maltitol, it suggests that its glycemic index is half of that of sugar, not no reaction like some people tend to refer to artificial sweeteners having. Maltitol is an artificial sweetener that does have some glycemic index response, but that doesn't tell us what it does to insulin spikes. And insulin spikes are the ones that cause your body to store the carbohydrate rather than tapping into the fat cells that have the stored energy in it. So you want to diminish your insulin spikes. And people will say, like, well, anything that causes an insulin spike is, anti-keto. And I'm like, protein causes insulin spikes. Like, you can't, like, a leaf of lettuce has some protein in it to a degree that it's going to cause minute amounts of insulin. Your body does that. It's how it handles trafficking certain energy producing chemicals. So I'm not as hung up. I'm being very vehemently energetic about this topic tonight, but I'm looking at this thing here, and I'll give some credence to the people who are worried about maltitol being different than some of the other artificial sweeteners, like the erythritol and some of those others. And I saw a recommendation where I'm like, all right, I'll give you some of that. So we say anything of maltitol, if you calculate the amount of maltitol, which they don't give you that specifically in here, because we have both polydextrose and maltitol as the sweeteners in this bar. So theoretically, it could be 50-50, it could be 60-40, it could be some other arrangement. We have no idea what the quantities are. But we know that the quantities of the polydextrose and the maltitol are used in making the artificial sweetener used in this, which is listed under the sugar alcohols. Sugar alcohols are also marked as saying 1 gram of glycerin in it. So glycerin is 1 gram. So let's take the 12 grams minus 1 gram. We've got 11 grams. let's say roughly 50-50, just to be humor. So half of that 11 is going to be about 5.5 grams. And then somebody I saw recommend taking all calculations of maltitol as an artificial sweetener and saying it's not 0 calorie, it's not a 0 calorie, it's not a 0 carb, but it's not full carb like sugar would be at those grams. So we're looking at a 5.5 gram estimation of maltitol in one of these bars. And the calculation, somebody suggested, just consider it, and you look at the data, and I actually will pull that up here. I pulled up a website looking at some of this data earlier today, and one of them says sugar alcohols. Some of the studies suggest that maltitol has about half the carbohydrate, the net carbohydrate load as table sugar. So if you take the carbohydrate count of those sugar alcohols, that would be maltitol. In this case, we're saying 5.5, and cut that in half. We're talking about 2.5 or 2.25 net carbs from the maltitol. And when you look at these bars, they already state that they're not counting the sugar alcohols, and they're getting a 2 gram net carbs from one bar. So to that, we can add 2.25. So we're still talking about 5 grams of carbohydrate for one of these bars. Now, anybody who's freaking the hell out about maltitol, these contain maltitol and they'll kick you out of keto. If you eat the box, my calculation, I'm being so angry about it right now. I do get a little bit vehement about these topics of all these pop science weirdos online will tell you things that don't make any kind of sense. Now, is it possible that the carb load from these being a high absorption blood sugar raising a carbohydrate, is it possible that it in a short spike all at once could raise your insulin, which could then drop you out of keto? Maybe, but I'd be willing to bet you good money that if I sat down to, a plate of just an absolute bowl of like 6 eggs worth of egg salad with no bread and no vegetables, just eggs and homemade mayonnaise, which is just oil and eggs. If I ate a bowl of that, the protein spike in that would give me enough of a carbohydrate jump at a certain point that could kick me out of keto too. Like, there's no safe, I think overall, like the only real way to measure whether or not this is something you have to worry about is a blood sugar and an insulin measuring device to see how you, like, and your ketone measuring, see if it drops you out of ketosis. So that's my stance on the Atkins. Is Atkins keto? I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. Honestly, I don't see any indication that if I roughly calculate your sugar alcohol as even 12 grams, the full 12 grams, it says one of those is glycerin, and glycerin shouldn't cause an insulin or a blood sugar issue. So we're down to 11. If you took the full 12 for maltitol, which we know it's not, if we took the full 12 and we cut it in half, because scientific research has said that 30% of maltitol is about 30% the carb impact that sugar is. So if we did that, 30 versus 60 for sugar. So 50% of sugar is maltitol is 50% of what sugar is. So if we took the 11, cut it in half, we're getting 5.5. If this were nothing but maltitol, which it isn't, 5.5 grams of net carbs on one of these bars in a day is not a sufficient carbohydrate load for me to worry about its impact on my ketosis. If I'm even really all that worried about ketosis, to be perfectly honest, I'm not. I'm not trying to lose weight. I'm not trying to watch my blood sugar. It's not a concern for me. But if it's a concern for you for those topics, then by all means, do your research on it. Take a chance and find out how your body responds to small amounts of maltitol and things like polydextrose and things like that. Test yourself. Find out whether or not it's a concern for how you want to manage your blood sugar. But I'm not going to stand and just accept blindly the paranoid fears of people who talk about eating a blueberry is going to drop you out of ketosis. I don't have the energy to worry about it to that level. It's, if maltitol was poisonous to me, then I'd spend the time worrying about it. But it's not. And it's not going to take me 20 days to get back into any kind of keto phase if I have 2 grams of net carbs above what I'm supposed to be having for the afternoon. It's not worth the paranoid fear and anxiety. Now, going into something that might be worth the anxiety is maltitol specifically is one of the ones that is frequently listed as causing gastrointestinal distress. So I may be gassy, cramping, and or have diarrhea, depending on, and that's the other thing. Like, people say that, but I was reading a post where somebody said, like, yeah, I get digestive issues from eating maltitol at all. And then the second paragraph of his post was, I discovered it one afternoon when I ate 5 caramel chocolate bars with maltitol in them as artificial sweetener. I'm like, that seems to me to be a problem of the dose, not the actual compound itself. And so I'm like, if you ate 5 regular Snickers bars, I don't imagine your stomach would be happy with you. So, like, I guess the moral of that story is, don't rely on people's reviews and feedback on what is and isn't good for your body. Find out for yourself, safely research it for yourself. If you have blood sugar issues, don't eat a whole one of these. Take a bite, see what that does for your blood sugar in an afternoon, and then, if it doesn't do anything, maybe have a whole bar a week later. You don't have to gung-ho it. But by the same token, don't accept everything some internet expert on maltitol says to you as the gospel truth. It's just such a weird... That's one of the things I don't like about some of these diet things, is they're just a bunch of weirdos out there with weird theories that they try to get you to buy into. But that being said, I'm also not, like, I'm doing this week where I'm eating these things, but honestly, I don't eat candy bars with anything approaching a regular tendency. So this is far more candy than I've had in the last 4 months in a week. I don't recommend that you resort to eating these things all the time, no matter what. Not because it's going to make you sick or anything. It's a stupid way to eat. Change your eating habits from the American food standard that we're used to. Because we don't eat healthy, and finding sugar-free versions of bad things for you, they're still not food. This is not food. It's edible, but it's not food. Eating an apple will be more carbohydrates in this, but I recommend eating an apple before I recommend eating a lot of these. So anyway, that's rant over, I think. We'll stop rant at 20 minutes, hopefully. I might get wound up again. All right, so this is chocolate caramel mousse bar. I got these at Hannaford's, which is a local grocery store here. Its data says 7% of my daily recommended value of fat, 20% of my saturated fat recommended, and 2 grams net carbs, 3 grams of protein, so 6% of my protein intake. So that protein fat ratio is sort of along the lines of what I'm supposed to be getting from my keto diet approach. The only thing in here to question would be the sugar alcohols, specifically maltitol. But with that said, this is not a large portion to be won. But I kind of got these because I'm curious about the chocolate mousse interior and their version of the caramel. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to say that caramel is better than those ones I had last night. And from what I know about food chemistry, I'm wondering if glycerin is one of the things they use to get that texture better. Because it absorbs water, maintains a moisture to the food, and can be used to keep things soft and supple. If you take if you were to take a flour that you cut and soak it in glycerin, it'll preserve it in a soft form and won't let it dry and get brittle. Now, eventually it will get drier as the glycerin changes chemically, but I feel like that might be something that can adjust the texture of something like a artificial caramel. And I'm kind of curious about the mousse. I got to give this another taste here. It's a better mousse than the Slim Fast bar I had on the first day. It has a little bit of stickiness to it, which, if I remember correctly, is probably the polydextrose. Because my understanding is it does have a stickiness to it, which is something that was missing from the first bar I did on Sunday. That stickiness that sugary things tend to have, polydextrose can offer a stickiness like that. But the mousse is also, it's really sticking to the inside of my mouth with the caramel and the mousse. The mousse is also more whipped than the filling I had on the first day. So overall, texture-wise, I do think this is a much better texture. It's very much like a nougat, and that passes as a caramel. I don't know that I like the chocolate as much, to be honest. The chocolate on the caramel thing I had last night was really good. It was like a dark, crisp chocolate that snapped. This is more like that fake, well, I won't call it fake. It's more like that soft chocolate on like a Snickers bar or a Milky Way. It's messy. It's really messy. Overall, this has a lot of the appeal of a real piece of candy. It's easy to see why this is tempting for a sweet tooth candy lover. Now, as I said, there's a possibility that I'll have digestive distress after having eaten this. So I guess I'll have to report on that tomorrow. But overall, this is actually a lot richer than I thought it would be. I don't know how somebody would eat 5 of those. I'm like, if you made them like a box of chocolates with little squares of like candy, eat one and put the rest away. I don't need a whole honking bar like that. These are not a meal replacement bar. These are definitely, in my mind, a treat. It says on the side of the box, meal, packed with protein and fiber to keep you satisfied. It has a little qualifier mark on it. But where's the qualification to which it leads? It's weird. That's weird. They literally have on the side, it says meal, and then it has that little cross next to it, which they usually put on there. Like, look for this symbol down below for further information, but they don't. There's no further information anywhere. All right, and then the next thing they say is snack with perfect amount of protein and fiber for between meal snack, and then a treat, an indulgent dessert without all the added sugar for a perfect after meal treat. I would say it is neither of the first two, at least for me. If you're the kind of person who's used to eating a candy bar between meals, maybe you'll consider something like this a snack. Maybe you'll consider it a meal replacement. I would almost guarantee you that this would not be satisfying as a meal replacement. This literally feels like it is just like a treat day kind of thing. Like if you go all week and you just, I've been good all week, I kind of need a treat, this would work as a treat. And you don't feel like you're eating like some stale, weird substitute for a treat and trying to convince yourself it's a treat. This tastes like a candy bar. If you fed this to me, I wouldn't suspect it wasn't just a candy bar. So this passes as a candy bar for me. It is really gummy though. Really sticks to everything in there. I would say if you're gonna cheat, this is probably a better choice of cheating. Because this the consequences of this cheat are substantially lower. Unless we have digestive problems for like 2 days after this, then I'll change my rating on that. It contains milk, soy, made in a facility that also uses eggs, peanuts, wheat, and tree nuts. I'm kind of curious why none of these things ever use egg. I guess, for a shelf-stable thing, you want something that doesn't have egg in it. But when you make certain nougats and marshmallows, there's some recipes that you can use egg white and gelatin and some syrups, and you whip those together hot, and that's what you use. And egg white seems to me like it would offer some of the stickiness and some of the protein. It'll just add protein, but it doesn't add carbohydrates to it. Not bad. I think I'd like it better in a dark chocolate with a snappier shell. That was a pretty soft shell. But I don't mind the nougat in there. They did a good job of the whipping and some of the stickiness to it. So keeping in mind the polydextrose is probably where some of that stickiness comes from. I don't think you'd have to add a lot. I think if you took if you just changed a fifth of the the erythritol that they had in the first bar I had on Sunday and exchanged it for the polydextrose, it would give you a little bit of the stickiness. And if you added a little bit of the glycerin from something like this, and maybe some of the polydextrose to the caramel for that other bar, I think you'd get a better caramel, and you could get a better texture on the first bar that I did, with the filling on that one feeling more like a cold stick of butter. And I don't mind sucralose a lot, which that was the other sweetener in this one. Sucralose is just Splenda. There are some indications that if you cook with it, the heating of it will break it down into some not great stuff. But I mean, you also shouldn't be eating a cup to 2 cups of sucralose in a sitting either. So I feel like, again, it's a dose makes the poison kind of situation. Like, I can almost guarantee you that you've encountered some lead in your life today, somewhere in your world, either breathing the air on the road on the way home from work or something like that. Your catalytic converters are probably shedding some heavy metals like platinum and stuff like that. You're exposed to that stuff in your environment on a daily basis. Probably to a degree that's more for some of it than you would ever encounter in a food item like this. So I don't spend a lot of time, worrying super bad about somebody's poisoning us with a commercially available food product. Now, my experience with what carbohydrates on a large scale do to my body, I do think the food pyramid recommendations we have in the United States are definitely wrong, at least for my body type. I think too many carbohydrates in a day could definitely derail my focus, disrupt my sleep, cause stress on my body, and cause me to retain enough water and potentially gain weight under stress and not be able to use my body's own energy stores because it's got an abundance of carbohydrates to play with to start with. So I do think, some of that happens, but I don't feel like that's somebody else's responsibility to figure out. That's me needing to figure out my relationship with food. And that's sort of why I'm doing some of these things, is to show that you should explore your relationship with food and what food does to and for you. There isn't an off the shelf. This isn't Kmart. You don't walk in and say, like, I'll take a body type 1 with a metabolism type 4 and just expect that all the things are going to work the same for you as somebody else. It just doesn't work that way. You have to put the effort into understanding what's healthy and beneficial for your body to do. If you have blood sugar issues, then yes, you should probably watch how your body handles certain foods. I've seen some scientific recommendations that mention some people can sit down with a bowl of ice cream and not have any kind of blood sugar or insulin spikes, where somebody else can definitely have massive spikes with just a spoonful of ice cream. Different people's bodies behave differently. And it'd be great if we could say, like, oh, I'm a type 1 form B. That'd be great to be able to get a sense of where it is, but it's still not going to be a cure-all for figuring everything out. You're still going to have to test and explore how they work for you. I'm not going to spend time right now for myself to get a blood sugar monitor and an insulin monitor and a ketone measuring device just to find out how this works for me. I'm just not going to spend the time worrying about it. Like, I don't have issues with those things right now. And if I had measured those things, there's no guarantee that the result I get would be the same result that you would get. And so, like, this is what's right for you is what I'm showing you. That's not my focus with this kind of thing. So I'm not sure if that answers the question I posted as the title of this video, but I mean, it answers it. I don't know if that's the answer you were hoping for, I think is what I should say. Because many times we want a nice, simple, straight answer, and the world doesn't give us simple, straight answers. Everything has some layers of complexity to it that we have to be aware of. It takes a little effort on our parts to learn the things that are appropriate for ourselves. That's the sticky solution to that problem, I guess. Probably has some polydextrose in it. With that said, I have a couple more of the Atkins things to try over the next day. One of them doesn't have any maltitol in it, as far as I can see. It's just glycerin and sucralose, I think. And then one of the other ones also has maltitol and polydextrose, but actually has a lower net carb total and total carbohydrates than this one did. So this was the one with the most quantity of the maltitol, as near as I can imagine. So based off of the rough calculations I'm making on the back of it, the next one will probably be the lesser one tomorrow, and then the better one I might do the better one on Saturday night, because I have to go somewhere on Saturday day. So I want to be avoiding diarrhea-inducing artificial sweeteners for Friday and Saturday until I'm back from that. So we'll see how my body handles this one today. When I talk about it tomorrow, I'll talk about whether or not there were any consequences to eating that today. And then tomorrow's will have less of that, and it shouldn't be an issue by midday Saturday. And then I will do the third one, which doesn't even have any of the dangerous artificial sweeteners, but I'm still going to be safe about it and just keep it clean for Friday and Saturday day. I will do something for Friday. I'm not sure yet what. And I do think as we get into next week, I will probably be doing some of the visual arts and some of the audio arts. So I'm going to see if I can crunch together a list on planning that out ahead of time just to get a sense of where I'm going to go with that. And then I just finished Umbrella Academy, and it's frustrating that they ended on a cliffhanger like that. But I mean, it's frustrating because I want to see more. So I think that's a good quality statement about it. And because I was so antsy about it, I actually went over to Wikipedia and looked up some information about the Umbrella Academy comic. And from what I've read of the plot summary of the first comic series, this TV series is so much better. It's so much better. It sounds like the comic isn't quite as gritty, but it also has some of that campy, the kids are rescuing the world from the evil Dr. Whatsoozy who fires off the Eiffel Tower as a missile. That's stupid. Sorry. I find that it robs the strength of the story of the series I just watched and makes it sort of goofy. And I think I saw something else that said the police detective in the precinct has a partner who's a chimpanzee like Pogo is. And I'm like, oh, that's so stupid. That's so stupid. Maybe it works in the comic. Maybe if you're reading it, you can just go with it. But I have to say, if you gave me the description of the comic books versus the TV series, I'll take the TV series. Definitely a better series. I feel that way about Watchmen too, honestly. I liked the movie. I read the comic after I watched the movie. The movie's my Watchmen. I'm sorry. But the ending they chose for the Watchmen comic is kind of corny. I'm not there for it, honestly. Yeah, the impression I got, it's a cliffhanger. I feel like it's hard for me to say because as I watched the Umbrella Academy series, there were a lot of things that I was like, oh, they're going to do this, and they didn't do it. But there were equally as many moments like the incident with Allison wiping the mind of Vanya as a kid, but not even knowing that that's what she was doing. It was phrased in such a way that she just thought she was doing something else. And so I'm like, I saw that one coming before it actually came, and I went, oh my God. And it's like, they did good with that. And so I'm hesitant to say where they're going to go next because I don't know which side of that equation I'm on. Am I going to be going like, oh, they set it up perfectly to do this? And then I realized that's not what they're doing at all. Yeah, rumor. Yeah. So I was like, there's that part of like, I can't tell if they've given us a Chekhov's gun or a red herring. And so I'm hesitant to say, but I would say there's a good chance that that we're going to see the police officer who got killed come back, or at least the chance for Diego to save her. And I feel like we're also going to have the possibility of seeing Cha-Cha again, despite the fact that at the end of this season, she's removed from the equation, shall we say. So, like, I feel like we're going to see some of that come back around. And because they jump back in time, the person in charge of the organization that manages the time stream, she's not dead at the hands of Hazel. She died in our time stream around the time that Vanya was attacking the audience at the stadium. So if they're jumping back through time to somehow change the course of those events, then she doesn't die. She's not dead wherever they end up. And when reading the wiki article about how the end of the first series happened, it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way at all. And I like the fact that this happened differently. The character arcs in this, the situations they're in, the sequence of events, they changed enough of it that this isn't the same thing as the comics. But I do feel like I like this version. Maybe I'd like the comic, but I feel like from what I've read about it so far, I doubt it. I feel like the comic I wouldn't like as much. But this was an episode about Atkins bars with a bonus ending about Umbrella Academy. I think I'll leave it there for tonight. I will see you tomorrow for the next bar, and then hopefully have stuff to update the daytime episodes by then. Alrighty, thanks for joining me, and sorry for the absolutely rabid rant for the first 20 minutes of this video. Alright, take care. Have a good night. Need to get better lighting. Can't see the keys on the keyboard.